And it's so good to be back here in Influencers Church. Another cool thing that happened, Influencers in Atlanta launched their Champions Club just this past year, which is so cool. And if you don't know what Champions Club is, it's a developmental center for kids, as in churches and public schools and orphanages around the world. And so we were so excited to launch the first Influencers Champions Club in Atlanta. So man, that's so cool. And thank you for reaching out to these families with special needs like ours. It really is transformational for them. And we can't thank you enough. I can't wait for the Champions Club that will launch right here at this campus. And we'll be able to reach out to kids and families with special needs. Well, hey, turn your Bibles right now to Mark chapter 8, verses 22. We're going to look at verses 8, 22 through 25. I really feel the Holy Spirit leading me tonight, really not only to talk to you about living as a healer, but how God can heal your life. And sometimes we think, being healed is being done by a physician, or it's being done by the great physician. But how many knows that when you give a part of your life to someone else, you're healed through that process? And there's something powerful when that takes place. And in my book, Champion, and we're going to be able to assign this, and you'll be able to get, we really talk about living as a healer. And if you get a chance after service, we'd love for you to pick up the book. But it really talks about living as a healer and the gift and generosity of your life. And how it not only changes the person you reach out to, how it will change you in the process. And I believe in 2018, and we're sitting in the middle of it right now, God has not just called us to be followers. He's not just called us to be leaders. I believe He's called us to be healers. And I know there's enough judgment in our world, isn't there? There's enough finding fault and criticizing, and we can find it everywhere. As a matter of fact, in America right now, I've never seen it so viral, where it's just attack. Whatever you're for or against, it's just constantly an attack, and I've seen this. But here's the thing I'm asking myself every day, and I'm talking to our staff, and I'm talking to our church. We're the healers. We're the lifters. We're the people that instead of turning away from the hurting, they run to the hurting. Instead of condemning the broken, they help heal the broken. And I believe God has called each and every one of us in this room to be a healer to someone else in need. I believe that God's called each and every one of us to make a difference. And when you look in the Bible, there's some key commandments that God gives you. And they really shape, and a lot of times we're asking God, what is our purpose? What am I supposed to do? What's my destiny? I find there are three key things that God really talks about when He talks about destiny. And you may not think of these things as something that really flows within that framework, but it really is true. First, He asks you to love the Lord your God. You can't have destiny if you don't love God, because He is and He does shape our destiny. The second thing He tells you is to love your neighbor as yourself. See, if you want to find your destiny, there's so much power when you begin to do what God's called you to do. And when you do what God's called you to do, it's going to begin to shape and form who you are and where God is taking you. Then the third thing God really calls us to do, and when we're asking about purpose and really what is the will of God in our life, He asks us to give thanks in everything. And really in doing those three things, what I believe when you do those things, when you love the Lord your God, when you love your neighbor as yourself, and when you give thanks in everything, what you will begin to become is not just a person walking this earth, but you will begin to have healing in your hands. You'll begin to have healing in your words. The things that you do and how you speak and how you live your life will begin to change, and you will begin to form your purpose and your destiny by not necessarily the job you're at or what role you're in, but it's going to be about the things that you say, how you are to people, how you respond to situations. So good to have the Billy Graham Association here today. We love them. And as a matter of fact, you won't believe this, I actually have a quote from Billy Graham on my message tonight. But one of the things I love about them is Anywhere they go, whether it's Samaritan's Purse or whether they send doctors to different places, they have healing in their hands. They have healing in their thoughts. They're there to change people and see people transform. And I love this right here, what Billy Graham said. He said, the most eloquent prayer is the prayer through hands who heal and who bless. If you want to have the most eloquent prayer in your life, it's through hands who heal and who bless. We can pray a lot of prayers, but do your prayers bring healing to someone's life? Do your prayers not only bring healing to yourself, but does it touch somebody's life in the process? I love Mark chapter 8, verses 22, where it says, then he came to Bethesda, and they brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the town. And I love this right here because many times we think healing is about laying hands, and it is. It's about laying hands on somebody and praying for somebody. But how many knows many times healing is a journey? That you've got to be willing to go on the journey with somebody. That you're able to walk it out, because many people aren't going to be healed by just one touch. Can Jesus do it? Absolutely. We believe that. But bottom line, it's going to be on a journey. And here Jesus begins to go on this journey with this blind man, because he's not just concerned about healing him because he can do it at any time. What he's concerned about is he wants to build a reservoir inside this man. He wants to show this man what it means to walk on a journey with him. And it goes on to say right here, he led him out of town. He walked with him. He took him by the hand and led him out of town. And then he began to go through the process of this miracle where he said he had spit on his eyes and he put his hands on him. And then all of a sudden he asked him if he saw anything. What a journey of faith, right? So first he sees the blind man. He can touch him right there. He can heal him at any time. But he begins to walk on this journey with him, and he takes him by the hand. And as he takes him by the hand, then he begins to walk him through that process of the miracle. And then he begins to test his faith right here. And he looked up and said, what do you see? And he said, I see men like trees walking. And then Jesus did the miracle. Then he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up. And he was restored and saw everyone clearly. I want you to know, in your hands, in your spirit, there are hands ready to heal and bless. And that Jesus wants to use you. And I love Romans 12:8, where it says, if your gift is to encourage others, be encouraging. If it is giving, give generously. If God has given you leadership ability, take that responsibility seriously. And if you have a gift showing kindness to others, do it gladly. Have you ever heard the saying, you didn't have to do that? You ever heard somebody say, oh, you didn't have to do that? What they're really saying is, you did that little extra that most wouldn't do, and thank you. You know, you didn't have to do that, but you did that little extra that most wouldn't do. I love in 1949, Time magazine called him one of the most extraordinary men of modern times. And he won the Nobel Peace Prize. And one afternoon, reporters and city officials gathered at a Chicago railroad station, and they were there to greet him. And as passengers disembarked the train, among them was this 6'4" giant of a man with a bushy mustache, and he had thick unruly hair, and cameras flashed, and city officials approached him with hands outstretched because he was a famous man. The man greeted them politely, and then, looking over their heads, asked to be excused from them for just a minute. And he quietly walked through the crowd until he reached the side of an elderly woman who was struggling with 2 large suitcases. And he wished her a safe journey. He picked up the bags with a smile and escorted the woman across the street into the bus station. He gave her a kind gesture, wished her a safe journey, and as he returned to the greeting party that was waiting for him, where all the cameras were and all the flashing lights were, and people were so hungry to see them right there, he said, sorry to have kept you waiting. The man was Dr. Albert Schweitzer. And he was the most famous missionary doctor who spent his life helping the poor in Africa. In response to Schweitzer's actions, one member of the reception committee said this: "That's the first time I've ever seen a sermon walking." See, your generosity to someone else may be the greatest message you ever preach. It may be the greatest thing that you ever do. And one of the first things that when I talk to people, and even when they're going through difficult times, even when they're facing different things in their life, I ask them this question: can you be good to someone else even when you're going through a challenge in your life? Can you be good to someone else even when you're facing things in your life? You see, when we found out about our son Connor, and we found out that he had autism, you know, it was overwhelming. And we weren't sure how to really walk through this journey and what was going to look like. And we knew we were going to go through some difficult challenges in our life. But one of the things that God spoke to us very early on was, can you help somebody else even while you're going through this journey? You see, when you're good to someone else when you're going through a challenge, you're kind of like an eagle. Have you ever seen an eagle in the middle of a storm? And the wind and the rain are hitting the eagle in the middle of a storm. The eagle doesn't stay in the storm. What the eagle does is it spreads its wings as wide as it can. And all of a sudden the wind begins to lift up the eagle out of the storm where it's peaceful and beautiful in that eye. And see, when you help someone else, even when you're going through a storm, you're like that eagle that's spreading its wings. And all of a sudden you begin to be lifted up and you get a different perspective on your storm. You don't look at it the same way anymore. And see, when you begin to do that, when you begin to fly like an eagle, see, you begin to look at things differently. You get a different perspective, and you don't look at your storm the same way, and then you begin to help someone else through your storm. See, when we started Champions Clubs, that was basically it. It wasn't that we weren't still going through a storm. It wasn't that we weren't going through hard times. As a matter of fact, my wife can only stay 1 week this week because we've got to get back to our son. It's 24/7. But we made a decisive choice to say, we're going to help someone else in the middle of our storm. And what you find in those times when you help someone else is not only do you get a different perspective, but you begin to look at your storm differently. Your storm doesn't seem as big as it was at one time. Then you get other people that encourage you because you've helped them. You know, I think one of the first things that if you're going to be and live as a healer is, number one, can you bear someone's pain without breaking? If you can bear someone's pain without breaking, you will bring them hope and become a healer to their life. I remember one service, I don't know if some of you know, he's been one of our staff members, but Pastor John Gray. And John is just this flamboyant, amazing, speaker and just bigger than life. And I remember one Sunday, I was praying, and I remember going into that service, Josh, and I remember just walking in, and I said, God, just let me be a healer to someone today. God, just let me help someone out today. I don't know who it is, but just let me help someone out today. I want to be a healer. And as I walked in, all of a sudden, I see this lady, and she's sitting there with her boy, and her little boy's in a wheelchair. And she's walking up to get prayed for, and I remember God just drawing me to this lady, and I asked her what was the matter, and she said that her son, who has an older brother, her older brother was running out into the middle of the street, and her younger son was chasing after the older brother, and as he chased after the older brother missed the car, but the car hit the little boy. And she said, the little boy has now had 8 brain surgeries, and half of his brain has been taken out. Now there's so much fluid in his brain that they're going into a surgery, and they don't know if he's going to make it. And I remember just sitting there, and just God put me in that moment and saying, Craig, what are you going to do with this moment right now? I remember praying and stuff like that. And I just began to pray for her, and all of a sudden, I got through with the prayer, and God told me, she said, you know what, go get John at the front of the building. Go bring John back up here to pray for this woman. So I run up to the front, and I just asked John, I said, John, why don't you walk up, will you walk up with me and pray with this little boy? And John was so nice, and he walked from the front of our building at Lakewood and walked all the way back to pray for this boy. And all of a sudden, I see this mom, her eyes get big, and she gets so excited. And little did I know that John was her favorite speaker. And she loved John Gray, and her dream was for John to pray for her son. And as John began to pray for her son and everything, she turns to me and she said, I knew there was a God when I saw John, and not because John Gray's great, but I knew there was a God because John Gray came from all the way to the front of the building to come and pray for my son. And she said, I knew there was a God because he would hear my prayer and just give me that little bit of encouragement. Well, sure enough, she went, and the little boy had surgery, and praise God that he's doing great today. He's doing fantastic. And you say, Craig, what's the big deal with that? See, it's not the big things many times that we look at that we can bring healing to someone's life. But can you come from the front of the building and walk back and just reach out to somebody and show them some care? Can you pray for somebody? Can you look when you walked into this room today? Did you just come to receive a message, or did you say, God, how can you use me tonight? How can I bring healing to someone else's life? You see, God wants to use you. God wants to build that inside of your life. I was talking to Pastor Josh today, and you know, when you're looking at special needs families, and this is one of the main topics I talk about when I go out and speak, it's mostly we're helping Champions Clubs, and we're helping reach out to special needs families across the world. And there's a new study from U.S. churches, and this new study is done by the CDC, and it's a child study, and they just came out with this just a few days ago. But in this new study, it says that U.S. churches exclude children with autism, ADD, and ADHD, and children with the greatest need for a supportive community were the most likely to feel unwelcome in a church. And the study said by the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, they said this: I would like to think that this research could serve as a wake-up call to the religious communities in our nation. The sociologist Andrew Whitehead said, and he said the researcher said, in many ways this population is unseen because they never show up, or when they do, they have a negative experience and never return. I talked to an author friend of mine the other day, and she asked this. She asked 50 families, and she asked them, what is the worst experience you've ever experienced as a special needs family? And 50% of the families said it happened in the church. Now, you know, how many knows I love the church? The church is the hope of the world. But here are families that are needing somebody to live as a healer to them today. They're needing somebody to say, I love you, I care. They're needing somebody to show them love and acceptance. See, it's not about building this great program and doing all these things, but can you show love? Can you give them acceptance when they felt rejected so many times? If you want to look at the most desperate situation in the world, I mean the lowest of the low, I can tell you who that is. The lowest of the low in the world, in my opinion, is a poor child in a third world country with special needs. A child that is poor and with AIDS can still go to church and school. A child that is poor with special needs is not allowed to go to church or school because they're considered a curse upon the family. And many are hidden, some are killed. There are all different types of cases. And many of these families feel rejected and they feel like nobody cares. And God's saying to the church, we're the lifters for these families today. We're the healers for these families. You know, when you go to a third world country, will you just heal and help certain types of people, but will you help the forgotten? Will you help those that nobody else sees? I spoke to a family, Pastor Josh and Sean, when we launched a Champions Club in Argentina. And they're in Argentina, they have nothing. I mean, there's very little for anything for special needs. And when we launched a Champions Club there, it was extraordinary. We had no idea the response that we would get. But in the first 6 months, over 80 families started coming to the Champions Club and coming to the church in the first 6 months. And then when I came back about 8 months later, they took me back and they wanted me to meet all these families that were there. And as I went back, I saw these mothers, many of them single because their husbands had left because it was overwhelming. I saw all these families back there, and all of them began to cry. Not because of me, I mean, nobody knows me, but I guess because of the work that we were doing. And there was one particular one that I remember, and she began to give her testimony. She says that she gets on a community bus 6 hours on a Sunday morning with her severely autistic son. If you've ever been on a community bus in places like that, they're stopping at every village, and it's packed out. And she gets on there with her severely autistic son every Sunday morning and goes on there for 5 to 6 hours to get to the church. I asked her, I said, why do you do that? Why do you get on? I mean, that's got to be very hard, and he has to have meltdowns on these buses. Why do you do that? And she said this is the first time that anyone's ever loved and accepted our child. And she said, I will go to the ends of the earth just so we can feel love and acceptance like that. You see, what that church decided to do is they decided to live as a healer. That they knew that there were healing in their hands, that they could make a difference in somebody's life. You know, the second thing I encourage you is this: can you value someone more than yourself? As Jesus was walking along in the scripture, he saw someone who had been blind from birth, and Rabbi, his disciples, asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? Jesus said it wasn't because of his own sins, and it wasn't because of his parents' sins. Jesus answered, this happened so the power of God can be seen in them. And see, when you stop looking at yourself and when you begin to be sensitive to the needs of others, what you are doing is you're reaching out to those that most people forget or put to the side or say they have no worth. But what you don't realize is God has put power within each and every person, that God has given gifts and talents. But it's up to the healers, it's up to the people that are willing to reach out to bring those things out. If we don't bring them out, we may never see the power that God has put inside of them. You see, how powerful is that? Well, last year we did a play. Just to give you an example. We did Beauty and the Beast live at Lakewood Church. And it, for the first time, starred special needs kids, teens, and young adults. It was like a Broadway production. As a matter of fact, in our city, we have a theater, a huge theater there in the city, and they did all the costuming for it. Over 10,000 people came to this production. And I'll never forget when we started the production, the director said, you know, Pastor Craig, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to get these lines, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to do it. I said, listen, here's what you need to do. Give them the opportunity. Just work with them. Watch what they can do. And the first month and a half, they not only had all their lines down, they had it down to a T. And when they performed, I'll never forget one. His name was Alex. And Alex had autism. And so what Alex would do, he was Lumiere. And he would get out on stage and he would nail his lines. Then he would put his headset on and he would walk like this backstage. Then when it was his time again, he took his headset off and just nailed his lines again. It was so amazing watching them use their gifts and talents that these directors came up to me afterwards and they said, this is the greatest experience of my lifetime. They said, I've never experienced anything like watching them go from here all the way up to here. People walked in and said, this is the most moving experience I've ever seen. You see, that's the power that when you begin to be live as a healer, when you become a lifter, when you begin to believe in people that most people won't believe in, you begin to change people's minds and perspectives, because here's the deal. God never creates anything that is not beautiful. Anything that comes out of his hands are not less than or put to the side. God has a plan for each and every one. Can you value someone more than yourself? You see, we look at brokenness as something that needs to be fixed. But God looks at brokenness as someone ready to be used. Jesus did all kinds of miracles, but the one miracle, the greatest miracle of salvation, he could not do in his perfect body. He had to be broken. And I believe this, brokenness has a perfume that pride can never produce. There's something so powerful that when we get beyond ourselves and either God breaks us over something or he breaks us and we begin to see things differently, we begin to look at people differently, we begin to notice things differently. See, people may try to lessen your worth by what you have done or not done, but God says we will never lose our worth in his eyes. And he wants us to have those eyes where everyone is value. Everyone deserves God's grace. Everyone deserves God's love. See, here's a question I want to leave with you is this. It's not what's the most you can do, but what's the least you can do. See, many times we're looking for big ways to help people. And because it seems so big, we end up doing nothing. In life, it's not about the most you can do. Sometimes it's about what's the least you can do. You know, half a loaf of bread is better than no bread at all. Jensen Franklin said it like this: a hero is someone that lasts 10 seconds longer than someone else. I think of my friend AJ. I don't know if we can show a picture of him real quick up here. But AJ is 22 years old. And AJ was born with a disease that left him in a wheelchair, bound and with a lot of daily pain. He's not very tall because it's stunned his growth. And he constantly lives in pain. And he's always confined to a wheelchair. But AJ is 22 years old right here in this picture. But here's the deal. He just graduated from the University of Laverne with a degree in business administration. Because an educator told him that he could still get a degree no matter what he was facing. And I love what he says. He says this: despite the challenges that he faces, he said, I embrace them and refuse to let them stop me from achieving my dreams. He said, my dream in life is to become a sports agent. Come on, how many sports guys do we have out there? Ladies, hey, I believe AJ can do it, don't you? He says, my faith is something that I lean on daily because of the challenges I faced. And here's the deal. Here's when you know that somebody has moved from victim to victor. Here's when you know that somebody is beginning to change their situation. It's this: when they're going through a storm or when they're dealing with something like AJ's dealt with, what they begin to do is they begin to help someone else in their storm. And they move from victim to victor. And that's what AJ did, because he got involved with Champions Club in Malawi. And we launched the first Champions Club in Malawi. And we began to reach out to these hidden kids, these ones that were forgotten. And AJ was a part of that. And he donated his wheelchair to help a child in need. And he wanted them to feel the joy that he got when he received his first wheelchair. And there's a picture of this child getting the wheelchair, and it completely and totally changed their life in how they got around and how they help people. Let me tell you something. If AJ can do it, can't we have hands that heal and lift and reach out to people? Can we change people's lives? You say, Craig, how can I do that? How can I be a healer to someone else? Let me ask you this. Can you give a smile to someone today? A smile is a powerful thing, isn't it? It can change someone's mood, their feelings, even their actions. There are all sorts of smiles. But can you give someone a smile today? The expression on one wears on one's face is far more powerful than the clothes one wears on one's back. And when you begin to lift people up just by giving a smile, can you give a few words of encouragement? Speak a few words of encouragement to someone else. We need to be a fountain, not a drain. Amen? One of the most important things you can do is remember someone's name, and just remembering their name and encouraging them. I'll never forget, this was just about a month ago, and we were sharing about our book Champion, and now what has happened with special needs is just in 10 years, autism just in America has went from 101 let's see, 1 in 121 kids to 1 in 59 kids are being diagnosed with autism. And it's an epidemic, and it's happening around the world. And I remember where I would speak probably 6 years ago, there might have been 4 or 5 families. When I spoke at the same church, 5 years later, there were over 30 families lined up. And I'll never forget, and I never forget this, when a mother comes up to me and everything, and I remember this mother just about a couple weeks ago, she began to cry and she began to tell me that she just found out her child had autism. And she said, we just got the diagnosis, so I'm trying to work through this, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. And one of the first things I say to any mother that walks up to me that has this special, it's not anything elaborate. It's not some amazing word from God. I just look at them and I say, I want you to know you're a great mother. I want you to know you're a great mother. And all of a sudden, tears begin to flow down their cheeks. Because here's the deal. They don't think they're a great mother. They're asking why, how did I let this happen with my child? Could I have done something different? I'm trying everything that I have, but it's not working out. It's just that simple thing. You're a great mother. You're a great wife. It's so powerful for them. And tears begin to roll down their cheeks. And they begin to see that right there at that moment, healing is taking place at that point in that time. See, you don't have to pray elaborate prayers. You don't have to do elaborate things. What's the least you can do? What's the least you can do? Half a loaf of bread is better than no bread at all. You see, can you bless someone today? I want to close with this. A person from our church named Lee is the owner of a construction company. And on their construction site, he noticed one of the workers working really hard. And he found out it was his birthday, and so he went and got a $10 birthday cake and a $5 carton of ice cream. And he bought plates and spoons. It wasn't any big deal. And he bought some little birthday card and stuff like that. And at lunch, they brought all the construction crew together, and they just began to sing happy birthday to this young man who was 32, and they had cake and ice cream. All of a sudden, at the end of the party, the young man passed Lee a note, and that note said, I'm 32 years old, and this is the first birthday party I've ever had. There's healing in your hands. There's healing in your life. You don't realize it. See, many of us are looking for miracles. But God's doing miracles all the time. We just don't see it. I call them ordinary miracles. Miracles that if you ask God every time you walk into a place, God, show me how I can be a healer. Show me how I can lift others. You say, what do you mean by miracles, Pastor Craig? Well, let me give you an example. If you can have a conversation with your son and daughter, that's no big deal to you. But for me, that's a miracle. I can't have a conversation back and forth with my son. There are things that God is doing every day. The fact that you could breathe today, the fact that you're here right now, the fact that you're a part of this congregation, just giving the gift of your presence for somebody can change their life. You see, I really believe this. Be determined to find a way to make a difference in people's lives. It will give you a new perspective on life and profoundly change how you live your own. Release your generosity, and I promise you, you will fulfill your destiny. That if you can begin to be good to people, if you can begin to lift people up, if you can love God and love your neighbor and give him thanks, I'm telling you, you won't have a problem finding your purpose. God will lead you to your purpose. He'll lead you to your plan. You don't have to go to a conference to find it. You don't have to read it someplace. God will take you that purpose and that plan. Can you live as a healer today? Who can you be a healer to through your generosity? Someone needs what you have to give. No one stands taller on their climb for success than when he bends down to help someone else. Who can you heal today?